When I opened that old prayer book and saw a small note fall to the floor, my entire body went cold. If she finds out, end it. Those 6 words shattered the illusion of the peaceful life I thought I had, and how all this happened. Let's start from the beginning. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. Good morning, friends. My name's Margaret Hensley, and I'm 78 years old. I've carried this story in my heart for nearly half a century, and even now, it still gives me chills when I think about it. It was the year 1969. The world outside was loud. Protests, war, and marches for rights. But in our small Virginia town, life moved quietly, like time had forgotten us. I was 29 back then, married to a man everyone admired, Thomas Hensley, the town's respected banker. People called him a pillar of the community. Sharp suits, polite manners, a confident smile that made everyone trust him instantly. We had 2 beautiful children, Daniel, 8 years old, a boy who loved his books more than his toys, and Lucy, 6, my little artist who covered every wall with drawings before I could stop her. Our home sat on a tree-lined street, modest but cozy, with a small front garden where I grew daisies my late mother had once planted. Most people thought we were the perfect family. Every morning I woke early to bake bread and pack lunches. Thomas read his newspaper sipping coffee, while I ironed his shirts and helped the children get ready for school. After they left, I cleaned, cooked, and worked on sewing projects for my clients in town, something my mother had taught me to do. She always said, "A woman's skill can become her shield." Back then, I didn't realize how right she was. On the outside, everything looked fine, but behind the closed doors of our pretty little house, things were changing. Thomas was colder, quieter, always traveling for work. The first Thursday of every month, he would vanish for 2 days, claiming the bank needed him in Richmond for audits. I never questioned it. Wives in those days didn't. Once, when I asked where exactly he stayed, his eyes turned hard and he said, "You've got a roof and food, Maggie. That's all you need to know." Okay, guys, tell me honestly, what would you do if your husband spoke to you like that? Would you question him or stay silent to keep the peace? Everything changed on a Sunday in August. I remember clearly. It was my late mother's birthday. The kids were at my mother-in-law's for lunch, and Thomas had gone out early, saying he needed to finish some urgent paperwork. I stayed home, battling the worst headache of my life. The pain was blinding. I knew he kept strong medicine in his office, his sacred space where no one, not even the children, was allowed to enter. That day, pain overruled obedience. I pushed open his office door. The smell hit me first. Tobacco, paper, and that expensive cologne he wore only on trips. I opened the top drawer searching for pills, but my hand knocked against a bookshelf. A heavy leather-bound Bible, one I had never seen him read, fell to the floor. When it opened, a small folded note slipped out. My heart pounded as I unfolded it. The handwriting was familiar. It belonged to Mr. Everett, Thomas's boss at the bank. The note read, "If she finds out, end it." My breath stopped. End it? End what? And who was she? My hands shook as I slipped the note back into the Bible and returned everything exactly as I found it. But in that moment, something inside me cracked. The woman I had been, the trusting wife, was gone. From that day on, I watched, listened, and waited. I didn't know what truth they were hiding, but I was determined to uncover it. Okay, viewers, what would you do if you discovered a note like that in your husband's drawer? Would you confront him? Or pretend nothing happened until you knew more? Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you how I began uncovering secrets that shattered every illusion of my marriage and led me straight into danger. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time Thomas moved beside me, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The note replayed endlessly in my mind like a curse. If she finds out, end it. Those words echoed louder than the ticking clock. Who was she? What did they mean by end it? And what secret could possibly be worth ending someone's life? Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. By dawn, I lay staring at the ceiling, realizing I no longer recognized the man sleeping next to me. From that day forward, I became an actress in my own home, smiling when he spoke, laughing at his stories, cooking his favorite meals. But inside, I was watching every movement, every word. He had new habits I'd never noticed, locking his desk drawer before leaving, flinching when I entered his office, and always disappearing on the first Thursday of every month. One afternoon, while ironing his shirts for another business trip, I found a crumpled receipt in his jacket pocket. It was from a jewelry store in Richmond for a diamond ring that cost more than half our yearly income. My birthday, our anniversary, and Christmas had all passed. It wasn't for me. My hands shook. The receipt wasn't just proof of betrayal. It was proof of a second life. Inside the same pocket, I found a small card with a Richmond address written neatly across it. I memorized it, replaced everything carefully, and pretended nothing happened. The next morning I said, "I'm going to Richmond to buy fabric for my clients." Thomas didn't even look up. "Fine," he muttered. That's how my secret trips began. On the first two, I found nothing, but on the third, I found everything. The address led me to a quiet neighborhood with perfect lawns and white houses lined up like a painting. As I passed one house, a woman watering her roses smiled warmly. "Looking for someone, dear?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I was told a teacher lives here." "Oh, you must mean Miss Clara Owens," she replied cheerfully. "Lovely girl, expecting her first baby soon. Her fiancé visits every first Thursday. They'll marry once he's finally divorced." Her words hit like lightning. First Thursday. Divorce. She was talking about my husband. I thanked her politely, walked away as fast as I could, and collapsed behind a tree at the end of the street. The world blurred around me. Thomas wasn't just cheating. He was building another life, another home, another family. When I returned home that evening, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the ticking clock. The smell of the children's crayons filled the air. My heart shattered, but I didn't cry. Instead, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. The note said, "If she finds out, end it." Now I knew exactly who she was, so I played the part perfectly. The gentle wife, the patient mother. But every night after the children slept, I began preparing. I hid small amounts of money from my sewing jobs in an old sugar tin and started watching him closer than ever. Then one Thursday morning when he left for his trip, I decided to search. His office drawers were locked, but a hollow book on the shelf caught my eye. Inside it was a brass key. Hours later, while cleaning his wardrobe, I found a hidden compartment, and the key fit perfectly. Inside was a metal cash box filled with plane tickets to Argentina, fake IDs, and love letters. In one, Clara had written, "2 weeks left, my love. Everett says everything is ready. If your wife suspects anything, you know what must be done." That same phrase again. You know what must be done. Tears filled my eyes, but fear turned to determination. He wasn't just betraying me. He was dangerous. And now, I was done being afraid. Okay, viewers, tell me honestly, if you found proof that your spouse might hurt you, would you run? Or would you outsmart them like I planned to? That night, as Thomas slept peacefully, I locked away my fear. I had 2 weeks to turn his plan into my protection. Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you how I turned his secret plan into my weapon, and the dangerous move that almost got me caught. That night, while Thomas slept like nothing in the world could touch him, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last 10 years. The man I once believed was my protector was actually my greatest threat. But instead of breaking down, something inside me hardened. I decided I wouldn't cry anymore. I would prepare. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. The first thing I needed was money of my own. Thomas had always kept a tight grip on every penny. I couldn't depend on the household savings he controlled. But over the years, I'd managed to stash away small bits of my sewing income, a few dollars hidden inside old fabric rolls and under the lining of my sewing basket. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. The next morning, I visited my best client, Mrs. Ellery, a wealthy widow who admired my needlework. While adjusting a gown for her niece's wedding, I mentioned, "Thomas says women don't need their own bank accounts." She stopped me right there, shaking her head. "Nonsense, Margaret. Every woman needs her own safety net. I'll take you to a banker I trust in Richmond, discreetly." And that's how I opened my first secret account, under my maiden name. It was a small step, but it made me feel powerful for the first time in years. My next step was evidence. I needed proof of what Thomas and Everett were planning, something that could save me and the children if everything went wrong. One morning when Thomas left early for work, I entered his office again, careful not to disturb anything. I used a small Kodak Instamatic camera, a cheap one I'd secretly bought from a second-hand shop, to photograph every suspicious document I found. Receipts, transaction sheets, letters, and records of fake accounts. Each click of that little camera felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Okay, friends, tell me, would you have the courage to stay calm in a house where danger slept next to you every night? Or would you run away before collecting proof? Still, photographs alone might not be enough. I needed copies of official bank documents. That's when I remembered Mr. Moyer, who owned the only stationery store in town. He was kind, the sort of man who couldn't refuse a polite request. "I'm making a surprise album for Thomas's birthday." I lied sweetly. "I want to copy our marriage certificate and the children's papers before he gets home." He hesitated, scratching his head. "The machine's for business use, ma'am, but I suppose it wouldn't hurt." Within half an hour, I had copies of every crucial paper, proof of their scheme to steal $500,000 from the upcoming factory transfer. I thanked him, smiling, but inside my pulse raced like a drum. That night, as I tucked my children into bed, I looked at their small, innocent faces. Daniel clutched his toy car. Lucy had fallen asleep holding her crayons, and I knew I couldn't let their father's sins destroy their futures. But there was still one more thing I needed. Someone trustworthy to turn to. The sheriff was Thomas's poker buddy. The local judge was Everett's friend. And even our priest was close to both of them. I had to be careful. That's when I remembered Inspector Martin, a man from the capital who occasionally inspected the bank. Thomas despised him, often calling him the righteous watchdog. That was exactly the kind of man I needed. Okay, viewers, if you were in my place, knowing your husband might be planning both a theft and your death, would you go to the police, or would you choose someone outside town like I did? I began forming my plan, one that could either save my life or end it. Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you how I secretly reached out to Inspector Martin and how one wrong move almost exposed me to Thomas. Sleep became a stranger to me after that night. Every sound, every creak of the house made my heart jump. I knew I was walking on a knife's edge. One wrong move, and Thomas would realize I'd discovered his secret. But I couldn't stop now. I had to reach Inspector Martin before the planned heist, and before my husband's lies turned deadly. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. The next Thursday, when Thomas left for his business trip, I told the children I was visiting a client in Richmond. My hands shook as I packed a small bag, hiding the camera film and copied documents inside a rolled-up scarf. I kissed Daniel and Lucy goodbye, pretending everything was normal. "Be good for Mrs. Parker," I said softly. "Mama will be back by evening." The road to Richmond felt endless. I kept glancing in the mirror, terrified I'd see Thomas's car behind me. Every truck horn made me flinch. When I finally reached the city, I went straight to the regional office of the Bank Inspection Bureau. The building looked intimidating. Tall, gray, official. But I had no other choice. I approached the receptionist and said, "I need to speak to Inspector Martin." "It's urgent," she frowned. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" "No," I whispered, "but it's about a crime. A serious one." Moments later, a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes appeared. "I'm Martin," he said gently. "Let's step into my office." Inside, I laid out everything. The fake IDs, the love letters, the flight tickets, and the note that started it all. "If she finds out, end it." My voice trembled as I spoke, but I told him everything, from the hidden compartment to Clara's pregnancy. He didn't interrupt, just listened carefully. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Hensley," he said, "what you've done is brave and dangerous. You're right. There's an ongoing investigation into Mr. Everett for laundering stolen funds through private accounts. Your husband may be part of it." Hearing that confirmed what I feared most, but it also gave me hope. Martin promised protection. "We'll need your cooperation," he said. "Keep acting normal. Don't let your husband suspect anything. We'll move before their planned escape." I nodded, though my stomach twisted with fear. "What about my children?" "We'll keep them safe," he assured me. "But you must be patient. If he senses anything, he could disappear. Or worse. Okay, guys, what would you do in my place? Keep pretending like nothing's wrong or confront him knowing the risk?" I returned home that evening, exhausted yet oddly calm. Thomas was already there, sitting at the dinner table reading his newspaper. He looked up and smiled faintly. "You're late," he said. "I had to finish a client's dress fitting." I lied smoothly. "Time slipped away." He nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You've been going to Richmond often these days." My heart skipped, but I forced a casual tone. "Better fabric there. Clients love it." He watched me for a long moment, then shrugged. "All right." But I could feel it. He was beginning to doubt me. That night, as he turned off the lights and pulled the blanket over himself, I lay beside him silently, my body tense, listening to his breathing. I thought of the inspector's words. Be patient. Act normal. But patience was torture, knowing that danger slept inches away from me. I began hiding the children's clothes and my small stash of money in a travel bag, just in case we had to leave overnight. Viewers, tell me honestly, how long could you live under the same roof as someone you no longer trusted with your life? I didn't know then that Thomas had already begun to suspect something, and the game I thought I was controlling was about to turn deadly. Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you how Thomas discovered one of my secrets, and how that night nearly ended everything. You know that strange feeling when someone's watching you, even if you can't see them? That's exactly how my next few days felt. Thomas's eyes lingered longer. His voice carried suspicion in every word, and the air around the house grew heavier each hour. Before continuing, Please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. One evening, while I was folding laundry in the living room, Thomas walked in without saying a word. He stood there silently, watching me for a moment too long. Then he said, "Margaret, you've been distant lately. Is there something I should know?" I looked up and forced a smile. "Just tired, that's all. The sewing orders are piling up." He nodded slowly but didn't move. His eyes scanned the room like he was searching for something. Finally, he walked over to the bookshelf. The same shelf where I had hidden the key before. My stomach dropped. "Where's that old family Bible?" he asked casually. I froze for a split second, but then replied, "I lent it to Mrs. Parker. She wanted to read one of the verses I marked." He turned toward me, his face unreadable. "That Bible was mine, Margaret." "Yes," I said softly, folding another shirt. "And it'll be back by tomorrow." He stared at me for a long, quiet moment, then finally turned and left the room. But the way he closed the door, a slow, deliberate click, told me everything. He didn't believe me. Okay, guys, what would you do if the person you feared started suspecting you instead? Would you run, confess, or keep playing the game? That night, I couldn't rest. Around midnight, I crept toward his office. The door was slightly open, and the light inside flickered from his desk lamp. Thomas was sitting there smoking, the ashtray overflowing. He didn't look up when he spoke. "Margaret," he said coldly, "do you ever wonder what would happen if one of us stopped being honest?" I froze in the doorway. "I'm not sure what you mean." He glanced at me then, eyes dark, sharp as glass. "Everyone keeps secrets, but some secrets destroy families." I swallowed hard. "That sounds like something you'd know better than me." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then surprisingly, he smiled. "You always were clever." He stubbed out his cigarette, stood, and brushed past me on his way to bed. But as he passed, he whispered near my ear, "Don't go through my things again." My knees nearly gave out. He knew, or at least suspected enough to warn me. The next morning, I called Inspector Martin from the public phone near the bakery. I told him Thomas was growing suspicious. He said, "We're close, Mrs. Hensley. 2 more days. The bank's scheduled transfer is this Friday. Stay calm and stay put. We'll make the arrest before they can disappear. 2 days. That's all I had to survive." When I returned home, Thomas was waiting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee. "I went by the bakery," he said, his tone casual but cold. "Didn't see you there." My heart dropped. "Oh, I went around the back to see Mrs. Doyle." He tilted his head, watching me closely. Strange." He got up, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "I'll be home early today." The moment he left, I packed an emergency bag for the children. Just clothes, documents, and the money I'd saved. I hid it behind the false panel in Lucy's closet. Viewers, if you were counting hours before a man like that discovered everything, how would you stay calm? Would you wait or take the children and run? That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Thomas returned. Earlier than ever, and this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Mr. Everett. My hands trembled as both men walked into the living room, their faces tight with something I couldn't name. Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you what happened when Mr. Everett came into my home, and how I realized I wasn't the only one keeping dangerous secrets. When Thomas walked in with Mr. Everett behind him, my heart sank. I had imagined 100 scenarios, but never this one. Seeing them together, standing in my living room, made the whole house feel colder, as if every wall was listening. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. "Margaret," Thomas said with a forced smile. "You remember Everett, don't you? He dropped by for a drink." I nodded slowly, hiding the tremor in my hands. "Of course, Mr. Everett. Good to see you again." He tipped his hat, his eyes sharp behind his spectacles. "Always a pleasure, Mrs. Hensley. You keep a fine home." They sat down at the dining table. I offered coffee, though my stomach churned as I poured. The two men talked in low tones, occasionally glancing at me. Every word between them felt rehearsed, like they were performing politeness to cover something darker underneath. After a few minutes, Everett leaned back in his chair. "You've been traveling lately, haven't you, Margaret?" "Richmond, I hear." My hand froze midair. "Oh, just for fabric," I said lightly. "My clients have particular tastes." He smiled faintly. "Richmond's full of surprises. You never know who's watching." The way he said it made my blood run cold. Thomas didn't look at me. He just stirred his coffee slowly, as though counting each turn of the spoon. "Gentlemen," I said quickly. "Excuse me, I'll get dessert." I hurried to the kitchen, breathing hard, gripping the counter to stop my hands from shaking. They knew, or at least Everett suspected. "Okay, guys. What would you do if the men plotting against you suddenly showed up at your table, pretending it's just a visit? Would you act calm, or would you run?" I stayed in the kitchen longer than necessary, trying to steady myself. When I returned, Everett was standing by the bookshelf, the same one that hid Thomas's secret compartment. He was studying the spines of the books, smiling faintly. "Fine collection," he said. "I've always admired your taste, Thomas." My heart thumped so hard I was sure he could hear it. "That one's my favorite," I said quickly, pointing to a random book. "A gift from my late mother." Everett's hand paused over the shelf. Then he turned back to me, eyes glinting. "Cherish those gifts, Mrs. Hensley. Some things once lost can't be replaced." After a tense hour, he finally left. Thomas followed him out to the car, and I rushed to the window, watching as they talked under the porch light. Everett's face was tight, serious. Thomas nodded once, then returned inside. He said nothing for a long time, just poured himself another drink. Then he muttered, "You shouldn't have lied about Richmond." My throat tightened. "It was for fabric, that's all." He stared into his glass. "Everett thinks someone's been asking questions. If he finds out who, it won't end well." He turned and looked straight at me. "You understand, don't you, Margaret?" "Yes," I whispered. That night I waited until he fell asleep, then tiptoed into the kitchen and dialed the inspector from the hallway phone. "He brought Everett home," I whispered. "I think they know." Martin's voice stayed calm. "We're almost ready. The transfer happens tomorrow morning. Don't leave the house. We'll come before they make a move. Tomorrow." It was almost over. Or so I thought. Viewers, be honest. If you knew tomorrow could decide whether you live or die, would you trust the plan or escape before sunrise? I looked at my sleeping children, their faces peaceful under the lamplight, and swore nothing would happen to them. But I didn't know that by the next morning, everything would spiral out of control. Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you what happened when morning came, and how one unexpected phone call changed everything. That night felt longer than any I'd ever lived. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like whispered threats. I barely closed my eyes, waiting for dawn to break so I could finally be free of this nightmare. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. At sunrise, I dressed the children quietly. "We're going to visit Grandma," I told them with a shaky smile. I needed an excuse to get them out of the house before Thomas woke up, but just as I tied Lucy's shoelaces, the phone rang. The shrill sound nearly made my heart stop. I hesitated before picking up. "Mrs. Hensley?" It was Inspector Martin. His voice was low, urgent. "Plans changed. The operation's happening right now. We're on our way. Keep the children inside and act natural until we arrive." My heart pounded. "Is Thomas?" "He's at the bank. Don't call or go near there." "Just wait." I hung up, trying to steady my breath. But before I could even process his words, I heard the front door open. Thomas was home. He walked in briskly, sweat glistening on his forehead. His tie hung loose. his expression sharp. "Get the kids ready," he barked. "We're leaving, now." "Leaving?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Where?" He looked at me coldly. "No questions, Margaret. Just do as I say." At that moment, I realized something had gone terribly wrong. Maybe the inspector's team hadn't reached the bank yet. Maybe Everett had warned him. Either way, Thomas was panicking. And when a man like him panics, he becomes dangerous. Okay, friends. What would you do if your partner suddenly demanded you pack up and go, knowing they might be running from a crime? Would you obey or risk defying them? Trying to stay calm, I said. "Of course, Thomas. I'll get their coats." While he paced near the doorway, I slipped quietly into the kitchen and grabbed the phone. My hands shook as I dialed Martin's number again, whispering, "He's home. He knows something. Please, hurry. Stay where you are," Martin said. "We're less than 5 minutes away." But 5 minutes can feel like a lifetime when danger is standing right in front of you. Thomas walked into the kitchen suddenly. I dropped the phone, pretending to reach for a jar. His eyes narrowed. "Who were you calling?" "No one," I said quickly. "I was checking on Mrs. Parker about the kids' lunch." He took a step closer. "You're lying." Before I could speak, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder every second. Thomas's face drained of color. "What did you do?" he shouted. The children appeared in the hallway, frightened. "Mama," Daniel whispered. I reached for them instinctively. "Go upstairs, both of you." Thomas lunged toward me, grabbing my arm hard enough to make me cry out. "You talked to them, didn't you?" "You ruined everything." Outside, tires screeched. Door slammed. A voice yelled, "Police! Open up!" Thomas froze. For a split second, the man I once loved flickered through his eyes. Fear, regret, and rage tangled together. Then he bolted toward the back door. I ran after him, but Martin's team was faster. The officers burst in, shouting commands. Within seconds, they had him cornered by the garden gate. "Thomas Hensley, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy," Martin declared. Thomas looked back at me, his voice low and broken. "You did this, Margaret. You destroyed us." I didn't answer. I just held my children close as they took him away. Okay, viewers, tell me honestly. Would you have turned in your own husband to save yourself and your children? But even as I watched the police car disappear, I didn't feel safe. Deep down, I knew Everett was still out there, and his revenge would come soon. Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you what happened after Thomas's arrest, and how Everett made his move when I least expected it. That night after Thomas's arrest, the house felt emptier than ever. The police cars had gone, the neighbors had retreated behind their curtains, and I sat at the kitchen table in silence. The ticking clock was the only sound that dared to exist in that space. My children were asleep upstairs, safe but shaken. I should have felt relief. Instead, all I felt was fear, because I knew Everett was still out there. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. For days, I didn't leave the house. The town buzzed with gossip. How the respected banker's wife had turned him in. How poor Margaret had been living with a criminal. Some pitied me, some judged me, but I didn't care. My only concern was protecting Daniel and Lucy. Inspector Martin called every evening to assure me that Everett would be caught soon. "He's a slippery man," Martin warned, "but we'll get him. Stay alert, Mrs. Hensley." That word, alert, became my way of life. Every sound outside made me jump. I double-locked every door, checked the windows twice, and kept a lamp burning through the night. Then one evening, as I was tucking Lucy into bed, she said something that froze my blood. "Mommy," she whispered, "there's a man in the car outside. He's been there for 2 nights. I looked through the curtains. Parked across the street was a dark car. A cigarette tip glowed faintly inside. I couldn't see the man's face, but I didn't have to. I knew it was Everett. Okay, guys, what would you do if the man your husband conspired with was suddenly watching your house? Would you call the police? Or pretend you didn't see him? I called Inspector Martin immediately. He promised to send a patrol car, but by the time it arrived, the dark sedan was gone. The officers searched the area and found nothing. "He's trying to scare you," Martin said. "Stay inside and keep your phone close." For the next week, I lived like a prisoner in my own home. The children stopped going to school, too frightened to walk past the window. Every shadow felt like a threat. I even started sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow, something I'd never imagined doing. One morning, a small envelope appeared on my doorstep. No name, no address. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single note written in block letters. "You should have stayed silent." I dropped it instantly. The letters felt heavy, carved with intent. Okay, viewers, tell me honestly, what would you do if someone sent you a threat like that? Would you run or stand your ground to protect your children? I took the letter straight to Inspector Martin. He examined it carefully. "It's him," he said. "Everett's taunting you, but we're closing in on him. Don't engage, and don't leave town." But staying put felt impossible. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining Everett breaking through the door, finishing what Thomas couldn't. The fear was like a storm cloud that never cleared. Then, 2 nights later, I heard a sound outside. A faint click, like someone testing the back door. My breath caught. I grabbed the kitchen knife, trembling, and slowly crept down the hallway. Through the small window above the sink, I saw a shadow move. Someone was there. Before I could react, headlights flooded the yard. A car engine roared and the shadow ran. The police were there just in time. Martin himself had been watching the house from a distance. He chased Everett's car for several blocks before losing him on the country road. That night, Martin looked at me seriously. "He won't stop, Mrs. Hensley. Until we catch him, you and the children are in danger." I felt tears sting my eyes. "Then I'll do whatever it takes to protect them." Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you how I decided to fight back, and the trap I set for Everett that would change everything. For the next few nights, I barely slept. Every small creak of the house sounded like a warning. Every shadow outside the window felt alive. I knew Everett wouldn't stop. Men like him didn't forgive. They avenged. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. Inspector Martin had officers patrolling our street, but that didn't calm my heart. I started noticing things. Footprints in the damp soil near the fence, the gate left slightly open, and sometimes a faint smell of cigarette smoke near the porch. Everett was watching. He was waiting. One afternoon, I decided I couldn't live in fear anymore. I had to fight back, but not with anger, with intelligence. Okay, friends, tell me honestly, if someone was stalking you and the police couldn't stop them, would you run and hide or set a trap to end it once and for all? The next morning, I asked Inspector Martin to meet me privately. We met at the small cafe near the edge of town, away from prying eyes. "I have an idea," I said. "Everett wants me scared and quiet. Let's use that." Martin raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "I'll pretend to run," I said, my voice trembling but determined. "He's watching the house, right? So if he sees me packing and leaving town, he'll follow. You can track him then." Martin leaned forward. "That's dangerous, Mrs. Hensley. If he realizes it's a trap, he could—" "I know," I interrupted softly, "but I'm tired of being afraid. I want my children to live without this shadow over them." He studied my face for a long time, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you don't move an inch without my team knowing." We planned everything for Friday night. Martin's officers would stay hidden nearby while I pretended to pack and leave. I felt both terrified and relieved. Terrified because I was bait. Relieved because I was finally doing something. That night, I tucked my children in early and kissed their foreheads. "We'll be safe soon," I whispered. They didn't understand, but their trust gave me courage. Then I went downstairs and began packing suitcases, making sure the curtains were slightly open so anyone outside could see. I moved slowly, deliberately, enough to make it look real. An hour later, headlights flashed briefly outside. My heart pounded. I turned off the living room light and peeked through the curtain. A dark car sat under the street lamp. I saw the faint glow of a cigarette. Everett. Okay, viewers, be honest. If you saw the man who threatened you parked outside in the dark, would you freeze in fear or take the chance to end it? At exactly 9:45, I carried the suitcases out to the porch. My hands trembled, but I didn't let it show. I opened the car door and placed them inside. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the side of the house. I turned my head slightly and saw him, Everett, emerging from the shadows, his face half lit by the streetlight. He smiled faintly. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Hensley?" My throat went dry. "Get away from my house." He chuckled. "You should have listened to your husband. You could have had a peaceful life." Before he could take another step, floodlights blazed from both sides. Police vehicles surrounded the house, sirens cutting through the night. Everett spun around, furious. But Martin and his men were faster. Within seconds, they had him pinned to the ground. I sank to my knees, shaking uncontrollably. Martin rushed to me. "It's over," he said gently. "He won't hurt you anymore." For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. "Okay, guys. What would you do if the person who destroyed your life was finally caught right in front of you? Would you forgive? Or never look back? Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you what happened after Everett's arrest, and how the truth about my husband's betrayal ran even deeper than I ever imagined." For the first time in months, I felt free, or at least I thought I was. Everett was gone, locked away and facing charges. Thomas was still in custody, and Inspector Martin assured me justice would be served. But peace, I soon learned, doesn't always come when the danger ends. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that come after. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. The police returned Everett's car for examination. Inside, they found documents, bank ledgers, fake signatures, and notes proving how deeply Thomas was involved in the fraud. But among those papers was something that froze my blood. A small photograph of me and the children, taken from outside our house. Everett had been watching us for weeks, maybe months. Inspector Martin showed it to me quietly. "He wasn't just trying to scare you," he said. "He wanted you to suffer." Hearing that broke something in me. For so long I'd fought to survive. But now, with the storm fading, I finally felt the weight of everything I'd endured. For days, I couldn't eat. The house felt haunted by memories. Thomas's laughter, the smell of his cologne, the sound of his shoes on the floorboards. Every corner reminded me of how easily love could hide cruelty. Okay, friends, be honest. How do you heal from betrayal when the person you trusted most almost destroyed you? Would you forgive, forget, or start over completely? I decided I couldn't live there anymore. I sold the house, packed what little we had left, and moved with Daniel and Lucy to a small cottage outside town. It wasn't much, 2 rooms and a squeaky floor, but it was safe. That was all that mattered. One evening, as I was unpacking boxes, Inspector Martin came by. "There's something you should know," he said gently. "Everett's talking. He confessed to everything, including the plan with your husband, but he also revealed something else. Something about your name being on one of the forged documents." My heart sank. "What does that mean?" "It means Thomas used your name as a shield. If the investigation hadn't gone this far, you could have been charged, Margaret. He tried to make you look like his accomplice." I sat in silence, feeling a wave of nausea. Even from prison, Thomas had found a way to hurt me. Okay, viewers, tell me, what would you do if the person who betrayed you also tried to destroy your reputation. Would you seek revenge or walk away quietly? Martin placed a folder on the table. Don't worry. We cleared your name completely. But you should see this. Inside were letters Thomas had written from prison. Unsent. Intercepted by investigators. One of them was addressed to me. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Margaret, I never meant for it to end like this. Everett pushed me too far. I wanted out, but it was too late. I thought if I ran, I could start again. Maybe someday you'll understand. I stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it back without another word. I think you should destroy it, Martin said softly. No, I replied. I'll keep it, not as a memory of him, but as a reminder of what I survived. That night, after putting the children to bed, I sat on the porch and watched the stars. The air was cold, but peaceful. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel afraid. I realized that sometimes surviving isn't about escaping others. It's about finding yourself again after they're gone. Okay, guys, tell me honestly, if you were me, would you ever believe in love again after such a betrayal? Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you what happened when Thomas reached out from prison, and the shocking truth I learned about his final plan. Months passed after the trial, and the silence that followed felt almost unnatural. I had built a quiet life in the cottage with Daniel and Lucy. Small joys, simple routines, and the comfort of knowing Everett and Thomas were both behind bars. But sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It knocks again, softly at first, then louder until you're forced to open the door. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. One afternoon, I returned from the market to find an envelope tucked under my door. There was no name, only my address written in neat, familiar handwriting. Thomas's handwriting? My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page. Margaret, I know you think you're free from me, but the truth isn't what you believe. Everett wasn't the one who started everything. I was, and I'm the only one who can end it. You deserve to know what really happened before I'm gone. My knees went weak. I sat on the floor, the letter trembling in my fingers. After everything he had done, after all the lies, what more could he possibly want to tell me? That evening I called Inspector Martin. He sighed when I told him. He's been trying to reach you, he said. Thomas has applied for early transfer to a lower security prison. He claims he's ready to make a full confession. A full confession. 2 words that could reopen wounds I'd fought hard to close. Okay, friends, tell me honestly, if someone who betrayed you wanted to talk again, would you go hear them out, or let their truth die in silence? For days I couldn't decide. Every time I looked at my children, I thought of the pain Thomas caused. But another part of me, the part that needed closure, whispered that maybe hearing his truth would finally free me. So I agreed. Under police supervision, I went to the prison a week later. The air there was thick and cold, the kind that clings to your skin. As I sat in the visitation room, I heard the heavy door open, and there he was. Thomas looked older, thinner, and tired. His once proud eyes were sunken with guilt. You look well, he said softly, trying to smile. I didn't respond. Say what you came to say, I told him. He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Everett didn't force me into the scheme. I created it. The bank losses, the hidden accounts. It was all me. Everett found out later, and instead of exposing me, he joined in. When things started to fall apart, he blackmailed me into staying quiet. I stared at him, numb. And what about the note? If she finds out, end it. He swallowed hard. That wasn't Everett's handwriting, he said. It was mine. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. You were going to kill me? His eyes filled with tears. No. I wrote it to scare myself, to remember that if you ever found out, I'd have to end the lies. one way or another. But then things spiraled. I lost control. I became the man you feared. Okay, viewers, tell me, if you were in my place, hearing this confession, would you believe him? Or would you see it as one last manipulation? I sat there in silence, staring at the man I once loved. I realized I would never truly understand why he did what he did. And maybe I didn't need to. I forgive you, I whispered finally, but I'll never forget. He nodded slowly, tears rolling down his cheeks. That's more than I deserve. When I walked out of that prison, I didn't feel anger or pity. I felt release. Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you what happened after that visit, and how one final letter from Thomas changed everything I thought I knew about his crimes. After that prison visit, I thought I could finally close the chapter on Thomas and everything he'd done. But closure doesn't always come when you expect it. Sometimes it finds you through one last truth, one that changes everything. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. 3 weeks after the meeting, a brown envelope arrived by mail, stamped with the prison seal. My heart sank the moment I saw my name written on it. For hours I couldn't bring myself to open it. Finally, when the children were asleep, I sat by the fire and tore it open. Inside was another handwritten letter. Thomas's final words. Margaret, if you're reading this, it means my time has ended. I've told you part of the truth, but not all of it. You need to understand why I did what I did. Everett was powerful, yes, but he wasn't the only one involved. There were others, men higher than him. I took the blame because I knew they'd come after you and the children if I didn't. What I did wasn't just for greed. It was for protection. But I failed you anyway. There's something hidden for you in the place where we first met. It's the only thing left that's truly yours. The letter ended with his signature, shaky and uneven. I sat in shock, the words swirling through my mind. What did he mean? Others? And what could he have possibly left for me after everything? Okay, friends, be honest. If you got a final message like that from someone who betrayed you, would you believe it? Or think it was another trick? That night I barely slept. By morning, curiosity and fear had tangled inside me so tightly, I couldn't ignore them. The place where Thomas and I first met was the old church library in town, the one where I used to volunteer before our marriage. So after dropping the children at school, I went there. Dust floated through the sunlight as I stepped inside. The same wooden shelves, the same creaking floorboards. Everything smelled faintly of age and memory. I searched for nearly an hour before I found it. A loose brick behind the bookshelf where we used to leave notes for each other when we were courting. My hands shook as I pried it out. Inside was a small tin box covered in dust. When I opened it, I gasped. Inside were documents, bank statements, letters, and photographs. Proof of large sums of money transferred from overseas accounts, signed not by Thomas or Everett, but by names I didn't recognize. Powerful names, men from the bank's board, and even a local judge. My heart raced. This wasn't just a story of love and betrayal. It was a web of corruption that went far beyond our marriage. Thomas hadn't lied about that part. Okay, viewers, tell me honestly. What would you do if you uncovered evidence that could destroy powerful people? Would you turn it in or hide it to protect your family? I took the box straight to Inspector Martin. When he opened it, his face turned pale. My God, he whispered, this changes everything. These are men we've worked with for years. He promised me the police would investigate quietly, to protect me and the children. Still fear returned, the kind that clings to you, whispering that danger isn't over yet. That night, as I watched the children sleeping peacefully, I felt torn. Thomas had done terrible things, but maybe in the end, he tried to make something right. I looked out the window into the dark, whispering, maybe this is how you find peace. Thomas, But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. When powerful men feel threatened, they don't stay quiet for long. Okay, guys, what would you do? Stay silent to stay safe or fight back to finish what was started? Don't miss the next part, where I'll tell you how the truth I turned in almost cost me my life, and how I realized Thomas's last act wasn't redemption. It was a warning. When I handed those documents to Inspector Martin, I thought I was doing the right thing, closing the last door Thomas had left open. But I didn't realize I had just unlocked another one far darker and more dangerous than anything before. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. A week passed, and the quiet I'd built around my life began to crumble. First came the phone calls. No one spoke, just silence on the other end. Then, one morning, I found the gate to my cottage open, and muddy footprints leading up to the porch. Someone had been there. I called Martin immediately. He arrived within an hour, concern etched across his face. "Margaret," he said. "We've started digging into those names from the documents. You were right, they're powerful men. Judges, politicians, even bank directors. But now that the files are missing from wherever Thomas hid them, someone knows they're in our hands. You need to be careful." His warning echoed through my mind for days. I started noticing unfamiliar cars parked down the road. The same black sedan that lingered too long near the school. The same flicker of shadows outside at night. Okay, friends, tell me honestly, if you knew someone dangerous was watching you but you couldn't prove it, would you stay quiet or run far away? I refused to run. I'd done that once before, and it nearly destroyed me. This time I was going to face whatever came. Then one evening, as the children watched television in the living room, a rock smashed through the kitchen window. I screamed and rushed to grab them. When I looked outside, the dark car sped off into the distance. Lying on the floor beside the shattered glass was another note, short and cruel. "You should have left it alone." Tears filled my eyes, but anger burned hotter. "No," I whispered. "Not this time." The next morning, I packed up the kids and drove straight to the police station. Martin met me outside. "It's escalating," I told him. "They're trying to scare me." He nodded grimly. "They know those documents can destroy them. We're putting you under protection until this is over." They moved us to a safe house on the edge of the countryside. A small cabin guarded day and night by 2 officers. It was quiet, peaceful even, but I couldn't relax. Every night I'd lie awake listening for footsteps or the crunch of gravel outside. Okay, viewers, imagine being trapped in a place meant to protect you. But every silence feels like a threat. Would you be able to sleep knowing someone wanted you gone? One night, as I sat by the window watching the moonlight spill over the hills, I saw headlights in the distance. A car was approaching, slow and deliberate. My heart raced. I alerted the officers, but before they could reach the door, the car stopped halfway down the drive, and then reversed quickly into the woods. Martin called the next morning to update me. "We traced the plates," he said. "The car belongs to one of the bank directors mentioned in Thomas's files. He's under investigation now. You were right, Margaret. They're trying to silence you before everything goes public." I felt my throat tighten. "So what happens now?" He hesitated. "We have enough evidence to expose them. But once this goes to court, they'll know you're the one who handed over the proof." I took a deep breath. "Then let them know. I'm not hiding anymore." That was the night I decided to face it all, even if it meant risking everything. Okay, guys. What would you do in my place? Stay quiet and safe, or risk everything to see justice done? Don't miss the final part, where I'll tell you how the truth finally came out, and the shocking twist that proved Thomas's last act wasn't guilt, but love. The morning I decided to testify, the air felt different, still and heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. For years I had lived in fear of Thomas, Everett, and the secrets that had nearly destroyed my family. But now it wasn't fear guiding me. It was strength, the kind that only comes from surviving everything, meant to break you. Take a second to like and subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay with me for more stories like this one. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. Inspector Martin picked me up that morning. The car ride to the courthouse was silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. My hands were cold, clutching the folder that held the last of Thomas's documents, the proof that would expose the men behind it all. When we arrived, the courtroom was packed. Reporters whispered from the back rows, cameras flashed, and the air buzzed with tension. As I took the stand, every eye turned toward me. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. I told them everything. From Thomas's secret life and Everett's threats, to the hidden box behind the church wall, and the men who tried to silence me. Every word felt like reopening an old wound, but I didn't stop. When I finished, the room was silent. Then the prosecutor spoke. "Mrs. Hensley," he said gently, "why did you risk your life to bring this forward?" I looked out across the courtroom, to the faces of those powerful men, their arrogance now cracked with fear, and I said, "Because the truth doesn't belong to those who hide it. It belongs to those who survive it." Okay, friends, be honest. If you were standing where I was, staring down the people who tried to ruin your life, would you forgive them? Or let justice finish what it started? The trial went on for weeks. One by one, the men involved were exposed and arrested. The scandal shook the town to its core. The bank collapsed, and several officials resigned in disgrace. For the first time, I felt the ghost of Thomas's sins finally lifting. When the verdict came, I sat in the back of the courtroom, hands trembling. The judge read each sentence aloud. Years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and threats. And when it was over, Inspector Martin turned to me with a small smile. "It's done, Margaret," he said softly. "It's finally over." I nodded, but tears filled my eyes. Because while justice had been served, a strange ache remained. Thomas had started it all, but he'd also left behind the key to ending it. In some twisted, tragic way, his final act had protected us. That night, after putting the children to bed, I sat alone on the porch, watching the stars. The air smelled like rain and new beginnings. For the first time, I felt peace. Not the quiet of fear, but the calm that comes after the storm. I reached into my pocket and took out the last letter Thomas had written, the one I'd refused to burn. His final words echoed in my heart. "Maybe someday, you'll see that I wasn't trying to escape you. I was trying to save you." Okay, viewers, tell me honestly, do you think a person like him could ever truly change? Can love and guilt exist in the same heart? I don't know the answer. But I know this. Sometimes survival isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering it long enough to never repeat it. As the morning sun rose, I whispered a quiet goodbye to the man I once loved, and the life I once knew. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Don't miss the next story. A new tale of love, loss, and the strength it takes to rebuild when everything falls apart. Sometimes life takes turns we never expect. Every person in this story carried their own pain, their own choices, and their own consequences. Maybe you saw yourself in one of them. Or maybe it reminded you of someone you once knew. What do you think happened next? What would you have done if you were in their place? If you have any questions about what happened to the other characters, or if you want me to share more about them, just comment below. I read every message you leave, and your thoughts truly mean a lot to me. And if this story touched your heart, inspired you, or even made you think differently, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep sharing stories that move people, open minds, and remind us we're all human at the end of the day. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for being part of this journey. More powerful stories are coming soon. Stay tuned and stay kind.